I've always been fascinated with the idea of a zombie apocalypse, ever since I was a kid and watched movies like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead and Return of the Living Dead. When I was bored in school, I would imagine how I would survive in a zombie world. The suspension of everyday life was appealing to me, and thanks to Hollywood, seemed exciting. At the time of making this video, the coronavirus has firmly taken hold of the globe. The world I'm living in right now, the empty streets and supermarket shelves, would not be completely out of place in one of the zombie movies I watched all those years ago. What I'm learning is that genuine national emergencies can be drawn out, both terrifying and boring. I now know that the reality of a zombie apocalypse wouldn't be quite as exciting as the movies led me to believe. So it's a good thing that we have video games that aren't tied to reality and allow us to live out our daydreams and explore what living in a zombie world might be like. There is no doubt in my mind that the Xbox One is the best console for zombie games, with the biggest library of zombie games. That title used to go to the Xbox 360, but I now personally own more Xbox One zombie games than Xbox 360. And when you consider that most of the Xbox 360 games are backward compatible on the Xbox One, it's clear to see why the Xbox One is the best console for zombie games. There are so many on the console that I thought I would do some honourable mentions, so here are 14 games I didn't have room for on my list. These are not bad games, in fact some of them were featured on my previous top 10 lists, I just don't have room for them anymore. I traditionally start my lists with a light-hearted entry, and this list will be no different. Starting at number 10, Far Cry 5 Dead Living Zombies is a zombie game that doesn't take itself too seriously, which is refreshing. There are 7 unique settings which gives the DLC plenty of variety. I especially like the forest setting where you take the role of a park ranger. It's really interesting to see zombies in different settings, and there's something about this forest setting that works really well. The only problem is that just when I started to enjoy this scenario, it ended. And that's probably the biggest problem with this game, it's just too short. Then again, it is just DLC and there are 7 different versions of it, so I can't really complain when it comes to value for money. I just wish that they focused on 3 longer sections instead of 7 short ones, and I'd love to see a full Far Cry zombie game and would happily pay the price for it. You could argue there are more deserving games for the number 10 spot, but how could I not include a game that has a zombie moose? This reminded me so much of Timesplitters 3 when you had to fight a zombie deer. I really wish they would hurry up and re-release the Timesplitters games. Number 9. Black Ops 3 Zombie Chronicles. This DLC is to COD what the Master Chief Collection is to the Halo games. Why there hasn't been a COD collection released with all zombie games on it is something I just don't understand. I know it would sell really well and I would be the first person to buy it, but for some reason it just hasn't happened yet. And until that does happen, Black Ops 3 is by far the best game to buy if you're interested in COD Zombies. Not only can you play a bunch of classic remastered maps, but you can also play a zombie single player of the full campaign. I actually prefer the older maps. There are some arcade elements to them, but I find the newer ones are just far too arcadey and over the top. The thing that I liked the most about COD Zombies was barricading up the window and holding the base. I don't think it really needed all the over the top arcadey stuff which you find in the newer ones. So I think for a long time this will be my go-to game if I ever feel in the mood for COD Zombies. At number 8, World War Z is a game based off a movie which is in turn based off a book. The writer of the book, by the same name, Max Brooks, also wrote the Zombie Survival Guide. If you're a fan of zombies at all, I highly recommend you get this book. I thought that I spent too much time thinking about zombies until I read this book and realised that Max Brooks has thought about zombies way too much. It's almost like Max Brooks has travelled back in time from a zombie world and he's written a book to prepare people for it. I was excited to see that there was going to be a movie based on one of his books, but I was even more excited to hear that there was going to be a game based off that movie. Make no mistake, this game is a Left 4 Dead clone, but that's not really a bad thing. I love the Left 4 Dead games. Probably the most unique feature about this game is the swarm technology. I don't think I've ever seen just quite as many zombies on screen at once. At least not that many that are swarming you at one time. The other cool feature about this game is when the zombies pyramid. They kind of focus on one point and they all climb up on top of each other to get to you. There's something really satisfying about throwing a grenade or shooting a rocket launcher at the base of this pyramid and watching them all topple over. It's interesting how quickly things can spiral out of control in this game, and that's what's great about Left 4 Dead style games, the tension and the fast paced nature of them. It's hard to know if you should focus on the pyramid of zombies that are on their way to you, or the zombies that are around you. I found that I was throwing grenades at the pyramid while also fighting the zombies up at the top levels. And it's an interesting dynamic to switch between the two threats. The immediate zombies that are right in front of you, or the massive horde of zombies that you know you'll have to deal with if you don't stop. Number 7. State of Decay 2. In 2018 this was number 1 on my list. The reason it has fallen so far down the list is because it doesn't have the longevity of the other zombie games. I played it for a good month when it first came out, and I would recommend it to anyone who's thinking about buying it. But after a month of playing it and once I completed the game, I never really felt the need to go back and play again. There was some DLC came out in the form of a kind of horde mode, and I did go back and play that for a few nights, but again grew quickly bored of this game type. I can't even put my finger on exactly what it is that made it boring. It has all the elements of what I would consider the perfect zombie game. There's free roaming in an open environment, you can scavenge for things, you can build your base up. On paper it's my perfect zombie game, and I was waiting for it to come out for so long and was really excited about it. Even though there's a lot of freedom in the game, it still kind of feels restricted. Like, you can put your base pretty much anywhere, but no matter where on the map you put it, it's kind of the same thing over and over again. You're stuck with the preset base layouts and are restricted on what you can actually have in each base. Maybe I've just been spoilt with 7 Days to Die, where I can just literally build whatever I want. Another thing that annoyed me is that State of Decay 2 is really just the game that State of Decay 1 should have been. But I don't want to sound too negative about this game. Despite its shortcomings, it is still a really good zombie game and worth checking out, and I think it deserves its place here at number 7. Number 6. Dead Rising 1. As I said at the start of this video, I grew up watching zombie movies, and Dawn of the Dead was one of my favourite. I think it's just the idea of having a full shopping mall to yourself, being able to choose anything off the shelf you want and not having to pay for it. The suspension of your job and everyday life. The good thing about Dead Rising 1 is it lets you do what I've always wanted to do ever since I watched Dawn of the Dead, and that's explore a shopping mall full of zombies. This is a no thrills remaster of the Xbox 360 game, and it came out at a time when I just wanted to revisit the Xbox 360 game anyway. It doesn't change anything from the original. In fact, it barely upgrades it. It's almost more like a port. With that being said, it has aged really well, and it's still one of my favourite zombie games ever. The only criticism I would have with the game is there's no way of making the mall safe from zombies. No matter how many you kill, they'll just continually spawn back. I always wanted to somehow barricade up the mall so that no zombies could get in. I always think it's a real missed opportunity, especially considering that's what they do in the movie Dawn of the Dead. I think it'd be a really good game mechanic, and I'd love to buy a game in future that allows you to do this. It would be a good meta game to always make sure the building you're in is secure and to walk the perimeter. Kind of like Walking Dead whenever they were in the prison, where the fences sometimes would become disrepaired. I think it would be fun to have to repair fence panels or look for areas where the zombies are getting too crowded. In light of the recent coronavirus outbreak, I'm now realising that supermarkets are not a safe place to be. And in fact, Max Brooks warned us about this back in 2004 in the Zombie Survival Guide. Here's an extract from the book where he lists the characteristics of a shopping mall. A practically indefensible structure, large shopping centres are always targets for both humans and zombies. It's always the case with social disturbance. At the first sign of trouble, these concentrations of wealth swarm with private security, police, and even overzealous shop owners. If a crisis occurs suddenly, a large number of shoppers may become trapped within the mall, creating problems of overcrowding, trampling, and suffocation. as well as attracting the dead. In an outbreak of any class, heading to the shopping mall would mean heading for certain chaos. So I know in real life a shopping mall is the worst place to go in a zombie outbreak, but that's what I love about Dead Rising 1 and video games in general. They allow you to do things that you couldn't possibly do in the real world. Number 5. Dead Island Definitive Edition. This includes both Dead Island and Dead Island Riptide. It's easy to forget how revolutionary Dead Island once was. I remember way back in 2007 seeing screenshots of this game. This was going to be something zombie fans had asked for years and never got anything close to it. An open world first person zombie game. This had never happened on consoles before, and I remember being so excited, constantly searching for new news or information about the game. I remember seeing the video of the damage system and thinking about just how realistic the graphics would be in this game. The final game dropped this damage system and didn't use it, and in fact the overall tone of the game changed quite a bit too. The images are quite dark and dreary, but the final game was a lot more colourful, which in itself is an interesting change of pace from the typical zombie game. Interestingly, I was looking through some old forum posts about Dead Island, and one of the first comments that came up was someone saying, "Zombie horror games are starting to be as annoying as World War II games." What he was suggesting was that there are too many zombie games. This was written at a time long before Dead Island came out, before The Walking Dead came out, and before there would have even been enough zombie games for me to make a top 10 list. It's a complaint I come across all the time. Oh no, not another zombie game. Although Dead Island did get some criticism, it really paved the way for so many more zombie games after it came out. A lot of games, and particularly zombie games, get announced and then for whatever reason don't get released. And I'm just really glad that Dead Island didn't become one of those games. Not only did it release, but I was really happy with the release, and it also got Dead Island Riptide off the back of it. Dead Island 2 seems to be in creative limbo at the minute, but hopefully it does get released someday, and it also goes on to inspire a lot more zombie games. Dying Light is placed just above Dead Island on my list at number 4. And this game is really just a progression of Dead Island. It's essentially the same game except it adds parkour elements. I think of it the same way as I think of Perfect Dark and GoldenEye. It's really just a new version of the old game with a little bit more style. At first I thought the parkour elements were a little bit gimmicky, but now when I go back and play Dead Island I feel that they're really missing. I just love the ability to jump over most walls. I really hope Techland would hurry up and release Dying Light 2, and hopefully I can get that on my next top 10 list. Number 3. 7 Days to Die. This is a game that feels like it shouldn't be on the Xbox. It feels like a PC game, and I guess it's because it is a PC game that's been ported onto the Xbox and PlayStation 4. And that's really why I love that it's on the Xbox. There are very few indie games, and especially indie zombie games, on the Xbox, not nearly as much as there was on the Xbox 360. When I first seen that 7 Days to Die was coming to the Xbox One, I was really excited by what that represents. I was expecting to see a lot more indie zombie games coming to the Xbox One after that. As it turned out, this wasn't the case, and that just makes 7 Days to Die all that more unique. Some people may be surprised how highly I've placed the game on the list. If you go to its page on the Xbox website, it only gets 2.5 stars out of 5. The reviews for this game, and particularly the most recent reviews, are all terrible. Most of the reviews citing the lack of updates. One of them explains the problem. Telltale are bankrupt and gone, the fun pimps are trying but it could be years. Telltale owned the console publishing rights to 7 Days to Die, and they went through a major closure, losing over 90% of their staff. But the fun pimps, the makers of 7 Days to Die, reacquired these publishing rights in a closed auction. But without Telltale's help, the fun pimps have problems updating their game now. In an article they posted on their website, they say that With Sony and Microsoft, no matter how small, any update has to go through a rigorous testing and submission process. So the console versions haven't had a meaningful update since July 2017. Which means there are lots of bugs that have been updated on the PC and lots of other updates and content that the console players are just now missing out on. Which I can see why is frustrating for a lot of players. So why is it number 3 on my list? Well, this is a bit of a personal choice for me. I grew up playing games on the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1, and they weren't connected to the internet and I never expected them to be updated. If there was a bug in the game, I just got on with it and worked out how to get around it. I often play a game and then don't touch it for a few months or even years and then just jump back into it and pick up where I left off. And when a game is being constantly updated throughout that process, I find it really off-putting. This happened with me in Minecraft. I played it in the very early days and then went back to play it, and all of a sudden they added a hunger meter and all sorts of other stuff that I wasn't used to whenever I originally played it. Yes, I could just play in creative mode, but the point is that something was added to the game that wasn't there before, which I didn't like. And I pretty much know that that's not going to happen now with 7 Days to Die. Also, I don't get a lot of time to play games now that I'm older, and when I turn my console on to find I have a 15GB update for a game I want to play, it means that I'll not be able to play it until the next day. When I was recording footage for World War Z for this video, I had a 15GB update to do, and then 3 days later, after the update was finished, I had another 10GB update to do, so I didn't get to play the game for a full 4 days. Update problems aside, I just love 7 Days to Die. The pace of this game is perfect for a zombie game. You know the horde is coming, and you know you need to find or build a shelter or a base. It's easy to look past 7 Days to Die as a Minecraft clone, and there are a bunch of them out there, but 7 Days to Die is different. When you're playing the game, you forget about the blocky Minecraft style graphics. All you're thinking about when you play the game is how are you going to survive the zombies that might come when the sun goes down, or the horde that might be coming tonight. It is easy to get put off this game on first appearances, and especially with the bad reviews. I only picked it up out of curiosity to see if it would be worth adding to my top 10 list a few years ago. I still play it every so often, and I'm building a pretty big base in it, and the fact that it makes me want to keep going back to it and playing it means that it'll stay high on my list. At number 2, Resident Evil Origins Collection contains both the 2015 Resident Evil HD Remaster and 2016's Resident Evil 0 HD Remaster. Resident Evil was first remade on the GameCube, and it set the standards for what a remake should be. In the same year the GameCube game came out, Resident Evil 0 was also released. It's a much less forgiving game. 0 is an unapologetic survival horror, and it was the last fixed camera angle survival horror game Capcom ever made. So in some ways what we have with the Origins Collection is Resident Evil's start and end to survival horror with a fixed camera angle. Resident Evil 1 didn't pioneer the survival horror genre, instead it took what started in the Alone in the Dark games and made it mainstream. Both of these games have an amazing replay value, and I always revisit them every so many years. I used to revisit them on the GameCube every so often, but now I just play them on the Xbox. I know some people are against achievements, but through looking up achievements, I actually have done things that I never used to do. For example, speedrunning Resident Evil 0 this year was a lot of fun for me. It seems that no matter how many times I play both of these games, I always constantly get lost and forget where to go next. In most other genres, people would think this is bad game design, but in these games it's intentional. Maze-like environments are what I would consider a golden rule of survival horror. When what you have to do next in a game is obvious, it just becomes really stale and boring. I'm really happy that both of these games were re-released on the Xbox One, and I think they'll always feature on any top 10 zombie game list I make for the console, because I'll never get bored of playing them. Before I reveal number 1, I want to mention some upcoming zombie games that I'm looking forward to adding to a future top 10 zombie games list. Dying Light 2 is a game that I thought I would own by now. I actually put off making this video waiting for its release. Techland recently announced that they were aiming for a spring 2020 release, but they now need some more time to develop the game. You don't know how happy it makes me that they're actually taking the time they need. It's rare for this kind of integrity in the games industry. The standard practice now is to release a game that's unfinished, and if they feel like it or enough people complain about it, they'll fix it later. It's good to see that Techland aren't doing this, and I hope it makes for a better game once it finally does get released. Dead Island 2 is another game that I feel like I've been waiting for forever. There was a recent job application that would suggest that the game's going to be cross-gen. I'm really looking forward to seeing what gets released, if anything, considering it's been such a long development process. I really hope it gets released on the Xbox One as well as the other generation consoles, because it means I can add it to my top 10 list for the Xbox One. Back 4 Blood is a game being developed by the makers of Left 4 Dead. There's really nothing I can tell you about this game, other than Turtle Rock Studios are making it, and they're the same people who created Left 4 Dead. I'm hoping this is the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead 2. I've always wanted Left 4 Dead 3, and there are so many other games that are similar to that playstyle, so hopefully we get another game in that vein. The final game I'm looking forward to is State of Decay 3. Microsoft have confirmed that they are funding this. Hopefully they fix some of those bugs and make the gameplay a little less repetitive. If Resident Evil 0 was the last fixed camera angle survival horror game made by Capcom, the number one spot on my list, Resident Evil 2 Remake, is a triumphant return to survival horror for Capcom. Putting aside survival horror elements for now, which is a pretty big deal for me, this is a top 10 zombie game list, and the zombies themselves in Resident Evil 2 Remake, and by definition the zombies in the Resident Evil 3 Remake, are by far the best in any game I've ever played. Here it's more quality over quantity. Each zombie you fight seems personal. If you don't kill that zombie, it'll be there waiting for you for the entire game. The zombies are very robust and pretty relentless the way they stalk you. There's something about the way they move that's just really eerie. If Resident Evil 1 set the standard for what a remake should be, Resident Evil 2 certainly maintained that standard, if not maybe even exceeded it. Unfortunately, the same thing can't be said for the Resident Evil 3 remake. It seems like a bit of a cash grab in comparison to Resident Evil 2 Remake. I guess if you're more interested in an action zombie game, then I would actually recommend you pick up Resident Evil 3. There was no good place for me to put it on the list, so I'm kind of including Resident Evil 2 and 3 at the number 1 spot, and I'll just let whoever's watching this decide what they think should be number 1. I have already released a full video on my thoughts on the Resident Evil 2 remake, so if you'd like to check that out, I'll put a link to it somewhere at the end of this video. I hope you agree with my top 10 list. If not, I would love to hear from you in the comments. I learn about a lot of zombie games through there, so it'd be great to hear what you think are some of the best zombie games on the Xbox One. If you have time, please subscribe and check out some of my other zombie videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.